What's going on, guys? Today we have an interesting video here. This is myself playing the aggression Luke that I was playing earlier against a strong Command Vader build from thorrk. And we're going to do 3 games here and we will see how it goes. So thorrk is of the opinion that Command Vader is the strongest deck in the game. I'm not entirely sure that's true, but it certainly seems like a very strong one. Maybe the deck that is best poised to make use of ramp in the game right now because Vader is such a strong leader and deploying him early can be a huge swing in the game. However, this command Luke deck is pretty good. Luke himself has a really good hero ability with his shield. Tarkentown there allows me to get a little bit of extra removal. My opponent, of course, using Darth Vader, has that ping damage if he plays villainy cards, and then the energy conversion lab for ambush works really well with the super laser technician in particular. All right, so we're going to go into the first turn, and I play Sabine Wren, one of the best opening plays in the game. Sabine Wren is a 2-cost 2/3 who has on attack deal 1 damage. My opponent did not have a turn 1 play. And so turn 2, my opponent plays a resupply. I'm going to wing leader Sabine Wren. So I have a really good start, but I have a nasty feeling that my opponent is going for a combo that we were discussing earlier, but that I've never seen in practice. So wing leader is a 3-cost 2/1 who gives 2 experience to a friendly rebel on when played, which is a very strong card. Allows me to buff up that Sabine and make her really threatening. But I think there's a chance my opponent is actually going to pull off the turn 3 Vader deployment combo, which we had been discussing earlier after a different game. And I'm trying to figure out what my options are to defend against that. I luckily have this open fire, which I think might be crucial for gaining control there. But let's see how this goes. My opponent sends in the Super Laser Technician. When defeated, you may put this unit into play as a resource and ready it. Uh, Having the Super Laser Technician attack and be defeated by Sabine using the Energy Conversion Lab for ambush. I swing the Wing Leader in for 2 because the Wing Leader could be pinged off, and my opponent then plays the Resupply for hand. So this is the combo. If you turn 1 Resupply or Super Laser Technician, and manage to get that resource on or I'm sorry, what you do is on turn 2, you either resupply or play Super Laser Technician. And then on turn 3, you do another Super Laser Technician and a resupply. And then by that method, you hit 7 resources on turn 3 and get to deploy Darth Vader, which is a pretty nasty thing to have happen. So I'm going to play a Fleet Lieutenant and just send Sabine in for 7 damage to the base. My opponent's base is being heavily damaged by this early Sabine aggression, which is something I quite like to see. I then shield the Fleet Lieutenant using Luke's ability. I'm trying to have some resistance to Vader, who is a powerful presence on the board. I now have at least some forces, but at 5/8 and on attack deal 2 damage to a unit, Vader is very scary. My opponent has Vader attack Sabine, defeating her, and also use Vader's on attack ability to clear my wing leader as well. Um, and I am still on 4 resources, now on 5 resources, so my opponent way ahead of me on resources. But I luckily have an open fire, which is almost the perfect card in this situation. Open fire does exactly enough damage to defeat my opponent's Darth Vader. So that 4 damage to a unit after he'd already taken 4 damage from defeating the experienced Sabine Wren does manage to clear out that Vader, so he only gets 1 turn of super early Vader, but he still has a giant resource advantage on me. So it's a tough situation, and we'll see what comes next. All I have is a shielded fleet lieutenant. My opponent plays Emperor Palpatine and actually does the all 6 damage to the Fleet Lieutenant, not even killing him, just knocking off the shield. And I'm gonna have the Fleet Lieutenant just try to push damage to the base. My opponent takes the initiative, and then I play a Green Squadron A-Wing to develop my board further and put more threats in play. I'm just trying to push damage through and clear out the enemy base as fast as I can. I will be able to deploy Luke Skywalker this turn, which is big, but my opponent hits me with an overwhelming barrage with the Emperor clearing the Fleet Lieutenant and the A-Wing there. So I'm left with no board whatsoever. And I'm going to bring out the Vigilant Honor Guards here, I believe. Or no, I end up going with Kanan instead. Because this way, if my opponent immediately attacks and kills Kanan, I can give Luke his lightsaber. So Kanan is a 4/5 with a healing ability that isn't very relevant here. My opponent swings the Emperor into Kanan and defeats him, taking 4 damage. I could now defeat the Emperor with Tarkentown here. My opponent still has 3 resources. I still have the my base actually also takes some damage from Overwhelm there. I deploy Luke. Luke at 4/7. His ability allows him to give a shield token to another friendly unit, but my opponent has wiped my board completely thanks to the early Vader Emperor and overwhelming barrage there, providing a lot of power to clear out my strong early board. However, I feel like I'm actually in a quite good spot. My opponent takes the initiative here, and I'm going to be able to, or actually, my opponent was going to take the initiative, but then realizes he can ping Luke. But I give Luke his lightsaber, healing the ping and giving him a shield and getting him up to 7 attack. Then I have Luke hit the enemy base for 7. My opponent's taking the initiative. And then I use Tarkentown to defeat my opponent's Emperor Palpatine also. So we're going into this next turn, and my opponent's at 1 life. I have Luke with a lightsaber and a shield. So it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to stop me. The best chance here is probably to deploy some unit that has Sentinel that can absorb Luke's attack, and then hope to get into a better position later in the game. But if he doesn't have a Sentinel, he's kind of stuck. And indeed, my opponent ends up conceding the game. So really interesting and unusual game of Star Wars Unlimited there, with the super early Vader deployment from the turn 3 Vader combo there. Doesn't end up getting my opponent the win though. I end up actually winning the game regardless. So, if you see someone do that, it seems like a crazy thing to have happen, but it is beatable. I was able to ultimately take the win there. Interesting game. That interesting game. Now, to be fair, I also had a very good aggressive start. Sabine into wing leader is a really good start. And I was able to take advantage of it. My opponent also, while he did have the really good combo, did not have a turn 1 drop. I think it would have been substantially stronger if he'd had like maybe he leads off with a steadfast shore trooper or whatever that unit's called. Could be maybe a stronger opening. But yeah, very interesting game, and we're going to go into round 2 here. I think we have 3 games for you here in this video today. All right, round 2, Vader versus Luke. Let's rock. I once again have a pretty good starting hand, so I can start off with either the Green Squadron A-Wing or Sabine Wren. Both really good units to begin with. And I'm then going to be able to follow that up with a Fleet Lieutenant on the next turn at the very least. Or hypothetically, I could play the other unit and then shield it. So I have some very strong early options with this hand, and I also have an open fire, which might prove important. I think it was a clutch card for me last game, allowing me to defeat that Vader um, before he did even more damage. I think if my opponent had, for instance, played a fallen lightsaber on Vader before I was able to remove him, it might have been a very different game. Luckily, that was not the case. This time, my opponent leads off with Admiral Ozzel, 2 cost 2/3. As an action, you may play an Imperial unit from your hand. You still have to pay its cost, but it enters play ready. However, your opponent can then ready a unit. I play out good old Sabine to counter Admiral Ozzel, and Sabine can actually defeat Ozzel in 1 hit. Thanks to her on attack, you may deal 1 damage to the defender or to a base, as well as her 2/3 stats. And if Ozzel attacks into Sabine, she can attack and defeat him using the on attack ability and not taking retaliation damage. However, there is a chance that my opponent might have, for instance, Snowtrooper Lieutenant would allow Ozzel to defeat Sabine and remain alive, which would be really strong for my opponent and would also leave a resource for Vader's ping against whatever unit I do end up playing. So there's definitely some things here that could be nice for my opponent. Let's see what ends up happening. Okay. My opponent's thinking about the move. Thinking about the move. Ends up being a attack to the base. I removed the wrong amount of life there, and I also started the wrong amount of life, I think. Or one way or another it was wrong. I then fix it. So I should be at 23 since I just took 2 damage. I then attack with Sabine and use her on attack ability to deal 1 damage to Ozzel, allowing her to remove Ozzel in 1 hit and stay on the board. Sabine is really a premier early unit. My opponent, I think, actually passes there. I play the Green Squadron A-Wing, 2 cost 1/3 with Raid 2, so +2/+0 while attacking. Really strong, annoying early aggro unit in the space arena. My opponent actually passes, which I'm happy to see, and then a shield token for the A-Wing there. So my opponent either didn't have a good play or was holding it back or something. Not exactly sure what the hand was there, but I am happy to go into the next turn in a relatively strong spot. My opponent uses a forced choke to clear out Sabine Wren, defeating her but giving me a card draw. I'm going to, so at this point I can either play Kanan or I can Fleet Lieutenant my A-Wing in for extra damage to the base and then also use Luke's ability to shield it. I end up deciding I'm going to attack normally with the Fleet Lieutenant or with the A-Wing, not using the Fleet Lieutenant. My opponent uses Vader's ability to ping off the shield, and I am then going to play out Kanan, who is a strong fighter in the ground arena and can also do some repairs to my base. My opponent takes the initiative, and I'm pretty happy with where we are right now in this game. I have a solid unit. We have equal life, and I have a solid unit in both space and ground. Also, my opponent has yet to ramp up, which is something that I'm happy to see. However, my opponent then plays an Imperial Interceptor. The TIE Interceptor there, classic ship from Star Wars lore, defeats my A-Wing now that the shield is down. I have a Fleet Lieutenant send Kanan into the base for bonus damage, and it mills a Seasoned Shore Trooper, allowing me to restore 2 to my base. So on attack, you may discard 1 card from the defending player's deck for each friendly Spectre unit, heal 1 damage for your base for each different aspect among those cards. I'm then going to use Luke's ability to shield the Fleet Lieutenant, and I will pass. My opponent had already taken the initiative at that point, I think, and I guess wanted to take the initiative rather than using Vader's ping. At this point, I am going to be able to deploy Luke this turn, which I'm quite happy about. My opponent has gained control of the space arena with the efficient interceptor there. Uses Force Choke yet again, killing my Kanan without him getting a chance to make another attack, but does give me a card draw as well. So I'm going to send in good old Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is a 4/6 with Sentinel, and when defeated, he gives 2 experience tokens to a friendly unit, and if it's a Force unit, you draw a card. Relevantly, Luke is a Force unit, so potentially a strong obstacle for my opponent in the ground arena, especially because Obi-Wan and Luke have some pretty good synergies. All right. Now, there is a chance, of course, that my opponent will be able to ramp this turn. If he has a ramp piece, he could deploy Vader this turn. I'm going to be able to deploy Luke this turn regardless, but there is that chance that he'll have Vader out as well. With either a resupply or super laser technician, he will be able to get Vader out early. Ends up pinging the shield off my fleet lieutenant using Vader's ability. Luke and Vader's abilities kind of mutually counter each other like that, which is kind of funny. I have the fleet lieutenant swing in for 3 damage to the base. And my opponent plays another seasoned short trooper, which I'm actually quite happy to see because it does mean that there isn't going to be a ramp piece here. And I have Luke hit the enemy base for 4 damage and throw a shield token onto Obi-Wan, who is now even more of an obstacle, thanks to the shield making him extra resilient, extra difficult to remove, and I've just drawn into Mace Windu. I also have quite a large hand there because of bonus draws that I've been getting from my opponent's stuff. I've drawn 2 additional cards thanks to those forced chokes. So forced choke is a very efficient removal piece, but it has 2 big downsides. The first downside is that it does not work on vehicles, which means that in the current card pool, at least, it is essentially useless in the space arena. So it helps control ground units, but not space units, since all space units currently previewed are vehicles. Maybe in the future we're going to see a space slug or something that is a space unit and not a vehicle, but at least for now that's not the case. My opponent deploys Vader. I am a little worried about an overwhelming barrage here, but I can sort of just focus on damage to the enemy base in this situation, as I actually have lethal on board if I can keep my units alive. I'm going to lead off with Luke attacking the enemy base for 4 damage and shielding my fleet lieutenant. So the reason for this is that if my opponent plays overwhelming barrage here, he won't be able to remove either of my units on the board. He can remove their shields or he can kill Luke or whatever, but my units are going to remain on the board and keep their damage there to threaten actually winning the game this turn. So my opponent is thinking about what to do here, maybe. The An overwhelming barrage here on Vader would allow 7 damage spread out, so it could do like it could remove both shields and do 5 damage to Luke, and then Vader could attack and use the extra 2 damage to kill Luke. So that's an option there. Wouldn't be terrible, but it wouldn't be the huge value swing that killing multiple units with that or killing something before it attacks would be. So I'm hoping to keep pressure on my enemy's base with these units and with the shields to make it difficult to remove them. I do also have some removal of my own. I have a open fire in hand, which I could use to kill Vader if he attacks normally into Obi-Wan. My opponent does go with the overwhelming barrage, so I am happy that I put that shield up. Ends up doing one 1 damage to each of my units, knocking off their shields, and 5 to Luke as expected. So Vader is now a 7/10 this turn, which also means he can defeat Obi-Wan in 1 hit. So I have Obi-Wan attack the enemy base, taking my opponent down to 1 life. The question now becomes if my opponent can remove the fleet lieutenant. Ends up paying 2 for Vader's lightsaber, which has an on-play effect when you play it on Vader for 4 damage. That does clear the fleet lieutenant, so the extremely strong Vader now can attack and defeat both Obi-Wan and Luke in one go, which is very annoying for me. But good old Mace Windu shows up, defeating the enemy seasoned short trooper in 1 attack and then standing up as a result. And my opponent has no option for dealing with Mace Windu here because he has to attack into Obi-Wan. He can use Vader's ability for 2 damage to Mace Windu, but Mace Windu has 7 life and will survive. So Mace Windu will be able to sneak in there and destroy the enemy base even after Vader kills Obi-Wan and Luke. Um, very interesting scenario there, but Mace Windu ends up winning it for me. 7 cost, 5/7 with ambush. When this unit attacks and defeats a unit, ready him. So I was able to ambush in, defeat that shore trooper, stand up, and be just 1 life out of range of Vader's enhanced ping. So I end up getting the win in the second match there as well. Let's see what happens in round 3. Round 3, Luke against Vader. Let's go. Okay. So this game, I think I'm going to keep this. So I have a Green Squadron A-Wing, and I can then play Yoda on the next turn, or potentially use Open Fire or Entrench, depending on what exactly happens. But Green Squadron A-Wing is a good start. This isn't like a dream start, but it's like it's good enough that I decided I was going to keep it and not risk mulliganing into something that didn't have a starting play. My opponent plays Ozzel on the first turn. This time I have the Green Squadron A-Wing as my initial play. Opponent takes the initiative. No Sabine for me here. But the Green Squadron A-Wing, 1-3 with Raid 2, pretty solid unit. I do draw Sabine at this point. So now I end up resourcing the Yoda because I'm not really damaged yet, so I don't need the restore. I don't like the card advantage is okay if he dies, but I would rather use the Fleet Lieutenant here because the Fleet Lieutenant can have the A-Wing attack for more damage, and then additionally is poised to potentially remove Ozzel as a 3/3 that trades well into Ozzel's 2/3. So my opponent hits my base for 2 with Ozzel. I hit his base for 5 with a Fleet Lieutenant buffed A-Wing. My opponent is then going to play a resupply, so we are seeing some ramp, and I am going to take the initiative. This turn, I have a few options. I could play open fire, I could play Sabine and shield her, but I think the most appealing thing for me to do this turn is to remove my opponent's Ozzel with my Fleet Lieutenant, try and push damage through with my A-Wing, and then deploy Kanan as a 4-cost 4/5 strong body in the ground arena. So I clear out Ozzel. My opponent, unfortunately, has a really good counter to my current situation here with a tie interceptor. I bring out Kanan, and then my opponent is able to use Vader's ability to ping off the Fleet Lieutenant as well. So very good value there for my opponent that turn. But I do end up with Kanan, who's a very strong unit in the ground arena setup, so it's not all bad for me. Um, on this next turn, I'm probably going to be deploying Yoda, but I'll lead off by attacking my opponent for 5 with, or I'm sorry, for 4 with Kanan, and I mill an overwhelming barrage. I'm very happy to see that get discarded, and I'm also happy to heal 2 from it. My opponent then does have another resupply though, so we are going to see Vader deploying a turn early, not what I want to see. I'm going to deploy Yoda. My opponent does have the Interceptor still. Plays a Force Choke to defeat Kanan, which does also cause me to draw a card. I'm going to shield up Yoda. My opponent hits my base for 3 with the Interceptor. I'm going to take the initiative. With the 1 remaining resource, my opponent pings off Yoda's shield, also dealing 1 damage to my base. Then deploys good old Vader. Not someone I'm thrilled about seeing. Vader deploying before Luke is not really what you want to see as a Luke player, but it does happen sometimes if the opponent hits multiple ramp cards. And uses Vader to clear Yoda, but then I believe rethinks it and is like, actually, I'm gonna have Vader hit the base there. I'll do the 2 damage to Yoda with Vader's ability. So this way my opponent doesn't waste Vader's on attack ability and is doing damage more efficiently. 5 damage to the base, 2 to Yoda. Okay. I do have the initiative though, which does mean that Yoda's going to get a chance to heal, or not to heal himself, but to heal my base. If I had drawn and it binds all things, I could have cleared the damage from Yoda and also killed that interceptor, which might have been valuable, but that wasn't what I saw here. However, I do have Obi-Wan in hand, which could be an obstacle for my opponent. I could also do takedown plus Luke's lightsaber. I could do open fire plus Luke's lightsaber. There's multiple ways that I could play this turn. However, I do think that I probably want to lead off with a Yoda attack here. Yoda attacks the enemy base, healing my base for 2. 3 damage to my base from the Imperial Interceptor here. I play out Obi-Wan, and let's see what happens here. So my opponent could have Vader attack into Obi-Wan and use the ability here. Actually ends up sending a ATST with the Energy Conversion Lab in to defeat Obi-Wan, and I give Yoda 2 experience and then draw a card because Yoda is a Force unit, so some value there from the keyword synergy. The ATST also taking 4 damage, and I can still deploy Luke. Deploying Luke here, so my opponent can attack. My opponent can attack Luke with Vader and use the on attack as well to have Vader clear out Luke completely. I then take the initiative, um, and that was that was probably a blunder. I think that what I should have done in that situation is I believe that I should have used Tarkin Town to kill my opponent's ATST before taking the initiative, because that ATST is now going to be able to do another strong attack to my base. As it stands, Yoda is going to want to trade with Vader there, which will also restore my base to life and get me a card draw. But I think it would have been I think it would have been a better situation for me if I had cleared out that ATST last turn with Tarkin Town, which I could have done. Forgot to do it though, so it does get to swing into my base again for 6 damage. I am thinking now about how I want to play this turn. So I have Mace Windu, who's obviously very high value. I could use Mace Windu to clear out that trooper, and then still attack into the enemy base. I could. I have I have 2 open fires, a vanquish, and 2 vanquishes and a takedown. So I have a ton of removal available, but I end up going with the Mace Windu option, clearing my opponent's seasoned shore trooper before it gets a chance to attack. Mace Windu is then ready, which means that he can attack into the enemy base for some damage here, and can hopefully create a problem for my opponent. However, my opponent plays Agent Callus and trades Callus with Mace Windu. They are both defeated, but my opponent does get to draw a card from a unique unit being defeated with Callus. I then remember to use Tarkin Town this time, clearing out that ATST before it can attack. Um, and then my opponent, is going to play out another Seasoned Shore Trooper. There is also then of course, the TIE Interceptor attacking into my base, and my base is getting real low, down to 7 life. There's not a lot of life left. My opponent has lethal on board. I have a big board here myself, but it's getting a little desperate. It is getting a little desperate. I have a lot of removal, but I need to try and clear things up. So this turn, I think I'm going to lead off. So I could play Mace Windu and defeat that Shore Trooper and be readied, and that is what I end up going for. I am then going to have the opportunity to shield him with Luke if my opponent doesn't immediately kill him, which would put me in a situation where it would be difficult for my opponent to get much of a presence on the ground. Another option would have been for open fire on that trooper, and then I could potentially do also an open fire on the interceptor. The other thing is with Mace Windu damage, this sets me up for that It Binds All Things that I have in hand on a later turn. However, my opponent clears him out with an open fire of his own, and then is poised to deal yet more damage to my desperately wounded base here, down to 4 life. We are not living too much longer if this continues. My opponent plays Colonel Yularen, heals the base for 1, 15 life to 4. Can I stabilize the game? Definitely. Oh, and he gives Yularen the Fallen Lightsaber as well. So Yularen now a 5/6, able to defeat my base in 1 hit. Thankfully, I do have the initiative, and I do have a copy of Vanquish in hand, so I am going to be able to defeat Yularen. Fallen Lightsaber is a +3/+3 attachment for 3. It has an added upside if you are a Force user, and it can't attach to a vehicle. In this case, it's just stats, but it was very relevant stats. However, Vanquish clears my opponent's Yularen. Open Fire clears the Interceptor. I finally cleared the board, but the problem is my opponent hasn't played anything this turn. Ends up playing out a Gladiator Star Destroyer. I have nothing to do except take the initiative, and my opponent uses Vader's ping on his own Gladiators to deal the last 1 damage and clear out my base. So solid win there for thorrk. I do wonder if I might have been able to stabilize and get the win had I remembered to use Tarkin Town on that ATST rather than taking 6 damage to the base there. I'm not entirely sure. Things could have gone differently, but kind of an interesting scenario. Ultimately a defeat for Luke this time ended up being 2-1 across this set, and I thought these were some really interesting games with the crazy Vader super ramp in that first game, and Luke still managing to get the win, and then some other hard fought games ultimately with a 2-1 result. So thanks for watching, guys. I thought these were some interesting rounds. I'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content, and additionally, if you want to see some written content, I have an introductory article for Star Wars Unlimited over at thefifthtrooper.com, and I will actually put a link to it in the video description below as well. So thanks for checking this stuff out, guys, and I'll be back later with some more Star Wars Legion content, whether that be articles, videos, or what have you. Catch you guys later.